This cemetery was leased from the city, I think in probably 1937. And it was smaller, quite a bit smaller. If you'll look around, you'll see the stones are all this way. And of course now you look south and you see the temple. But the temple sits on what had become cemetery property. The church had purchased the land to the south. And this this property had a street called Mormon Street platted right through it, but never developed. And so when the Mormons leased this cemetery for $1 a year, the city divided the street and gave half to the cemetery and half to the property to the south. And the LDS added quite a section so that it was a nice sized cemetery. No gravestones down there, but we did discover when we did remote sensing of the territory here, you know, we went back and forth for decades as to how many people were buried here, how many LDS were buried here. And then, of course, we had to know if there were any burials down where the temple is, which is way outside the original cemetery. Well, it turned out that there were 7 burials down there by non-members. If you will look at the remote sensing report we did, you'll see that the LDS burials start up here just a little north of this and extend over here a little further, and then down here quite a bit further, and over here back as far as this bench or a little further. And all of this is very, very carefully laid out with rows of 25 burials. Row number 1, row number 2, row number 3, until you have something like 315 burials here. In some cases, actually, there are not that many graves, but there are about 315 burials. I think there are 10 multiple burials where a baby and a mother will be buried together, or maybe 2 babies. So there, and these are the names. This is what the sexton wrote. Now, a sexton is just like you and me. Sometimes they misspell people's names. So there are some corrections, and that is being done by, what's our friend's name, in sometimes in Utah and sometimes in China. Can't think of his name right now. Oh. But he's working on a corrected list of all these people. Can't think of it. It'll pop back into my mind.
Yeah,
Pardon me?
He came, the gentleman, the brother that you're talking about, came to the temple. Is this the one that you're talking about?
I believe he did.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's doing research on it.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name.
So.
Research on what?
Huh?
He's doing research on what?
On the burials here.
Correcting the names, the spelling of the names. I used to be, years and years ago, I was one of the clerks in Regina, Saskatchewan, and I sat at a big desk. In those days, the clerk sat at a big desk. Kept a careful record of all the meetings and the names. And of course, I'd listen to the names and then I'd write them down. They didn't always write them right. Now you'll see here that there is a section here of Cutler's Park burials. And I always assumed that Cutler's Park burials were the same, in the same plot. And they're listed right along with the section handwritten record. Right on down, excepting there's a little line that says, this begins the burials in Mormon Pioneer Cemetery. So where these people are buried, we don't know yet. Oh, maybe you'll find that out.
They're across the street.
You think so?
I think it's possible they're not.
Because there one journal said we moved the Cutler's Park burials, but to where? We thought this would be the natural place, but you know, I'm a skimmer. I'm very interested in the Native Americans in this area. There's a tremendously important history of Native Americans and the French. The French built all sort of cultural bridges between the whites and the Indians here. Then along came the Spanish with their careful record keeping. And that's an important period. And then of course came the river traffic and the fur trade and the Americans and the Mormons and the U.S. Dragoons and the missionaries and all this. And I've tried to blend all of this together so that those who are not members of the church would accept the history because they had never heard any of it. Whatever they had heard was either sketchy or very, very faulty. And so in that way, that's what led to the radio broadcast. People discovered that it was possible to get true history out of the area. So, but here's one of my major faults. I never did discover where the Cutler's Park people were buried. Well, now you see very few stones here. You remember yesterday we said Omaha annexed Florence. We're in Florence. Omaha annexed Florence during World War I. And when Omaha took over this cemetery from the city of Florence, the workmen came here and very carefully cleaned everything up, and wherever a stone was down, they cleared it away and threw it away. So we have very few markers here today. And I suspect that many of the original markers were wooden shakes. Therefore, they had burned off a long time before. But people would come back and say, well, this is where my ancestor was buried, and put a stone there. But then the city of Omaha took care of most of those stones. So we didn't have very much, but now we know exactly where your ancestors were buried in this plot. We can show you the very spot.
How'd you do that?
You go over to the library there, and there's a book saying something about a grave experience, and it lists every burial, and there's a map. You bring that map, and you look here, and you'll find precisely where your ancestors are buried.
And how did they determine the location?
We did remote sensing. We brought in a remote sensing team from Lincoln, and we went over this entire territory, especially at the south end where, well, actually we went carefully over every foot of the cemeteries, and just to make sure that when the temple was built, nothing was built over bodies.